Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're back for another sneak preview, this time of the Big Radials P40B Tomahawk. Big Radials are a new development studio for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and whilst you'd be forgiven for wondering why a P40B is being produced by a developer called Big Radials, according to the developer the name harks back to the era as much as the engines, and even the tyres as well. So here we have a developer that's looking to create warplanes and bushplanes for the sim. Very much something that's up my street. Anyway, Big Radials reached out to me and asked if I'd like to try their product, and of course I was more than happy to do so. So in today's video we're going to take a quick flight around the local area just out to the west of Orlando. We're currently on the ground at Orlampa Airport, and full marks to anybody that can tell me the reasoning behind that choice. As usual with my previews, we'll be carrying out a full flight in the aircraft all the way from startup to shutdown. And once again this video is a preview of the P40B. As such we're just looking to get an overall feel for the aircraft, and I'll be withholding my judgments and opinions until we get our hands on the final version. In that vein, the aircraft that you'll see today is a pre-release version of the Tomahawk. The developers have of course asked me to mention that the product is still a work in progress. That being said, it is apparently on a short final, so you can expect to see it fairly soon. Very commendably, the developers have asked me for a full, honest and frank review of the aircraft. As I say, we won't touch too much on the specifics during the flight itself. I'll give you the opportunity to get acquainted with the aircraft and see for yourself what it's all about. But at the end of the video, in line with the developers' wishes, I will give you a quick breakdown on the aircraft and how it's coming along so far, what I think is working well and areas that I would like to see improved. Anyway guys, I do hope you enjoy the video. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. We'll now get ourselves strapped up in the cockpit of the P40B and get the aircraft started up. So welcome to the cockpit of the Big Radials P40B Tomahawk. As usual we'll run through the checklist, get the aircraft started up, and then once we're in the air we'll take a little bit of a trip around the local area just to put the Tomahawk through its paces and get a feel for the product. So starting with the cockpit checks, the flap lever is in the neutral position, landing gear is in the neutral position, trim tabs, both the elevator and the rudder trim are in the neutral position, throttle will open about 1/4 of an inch, mixture is in the idle cutoff position, and the propeller control is fully forward. Fuel selector will come onto fuselage for the start. Parking brake is set, carburetor heat control is in the cold position, and the cowl flaps we can open. For the startup, the ignition switch can come to both. Battery switch can come on, as can the generator. Recognition and navigation lights can come on. Electric fuel boost pump can come on. It's a cold start, so we'll prime the engine 3 times. And checking that the prop area is clear, which it is. Clear prop! So we'll energise the starter, we'll hold that down for around 5 seconds. And we'll engage. So we have a good start, mixture is in the full rich position. Adjusting the power to maintain around 1000 RPM initially. Oil pressure has come up. So there's about 1100 RPM. We're looking for an oil pressure between 60 and 70 psi. Currently showing around 70 psi there, just above. We're within the limits. Looking for a max of 85. Oil temperature looking for around 60 to 80 degrees. Currently just coming up through 50 degrees, so the oil temperature is still warming up a little bit there. And the fuel pressure we're looking between 15 and 18 psi, and currently showing around 15. Coolant temperature we're looking between 85 and 105, and we're currently showing around 75, that's still increasing as well. Electric fuel pump can come off. For the taxi we'll leave the canopy open, be taxiing around 1000 RPM and fully back on the stick. We'll get the radio on now. And a nice little touch here from Big Radials, we do have a basic set of modern avionics equipment on board the aircraft. Hidden away in the left machine gun here, we can just open up this little cubby hole and you can see we do have a radio and a transponder, which I thought was a really nice touch. So we'll tune up traffic. We'll be departing out to the north and we'll be taking off on runway 22.
Foxtrot Alpha 08 traffic cone. India Tango Bravo Sierra taking off runway 22 departure.
So part brake can come off, full back on the stick. Now we'll just very carefully make our way out towards the holding point at runway 22. As with all tailwheel aircraft, you have to be very careful in terms of the ground handling. The visibility out the front is of course very limited. And we need to make sure we're careful on the brakes as well, so that we don't tip the aircraft over. So runway 22 is pretty much straight ahead of us. We just join on to the grass taxiway here off on our left. All clear on the other runway. And 22's just off the right wing here at about 3 o'clock. So we'll just taxi straight ahead towards the threshold. And we'll carry out our run up at the threshold. Again, all clear on the intersecting runway. Just continuing to make some S-turns just so that we can visually see the threshold for ourselves, just coming up now. Very gently bring the aircraft to a stop. So part brake on, coming back up to 1000 RPM. The pre-takeoff, the canopy is open, the flight controls are full free and in the correct sense. The flaps are up. Trim tabs are in the neutral position. For the takeoff it calls for 0.3 up on the elevator trim tab according to the checklist. And we'll leave the rudder trim in neutral, that does call for 0.2. I'm wondering if that's not a typo though, as the manual does state elsewhere that it's actually 3 units up for the takeoff. Feather control is in the fully forward position. Mixture we'll bring back to the auto rich position. Electric boost pump can come back on. Battery and generator switches are on. Oil pressure is checked, oil temperature is checked, fuel pressure is checked, and the coolant temperature is now looking good. Carburetor heat is in the cold position. Cowl flaps will move to the combat climb position. And the mag check will come up to 2300 RPM. Making sure the brakes are holding. So it's 2300, we'll check each of the magnetos. It's about a 50 to 75 RPM drop on the right. Back to both. And now the left. And same on the left, so the magnetos are within limits. Come back on the power. And we are now ready for the takeoff. So as I say, we're all set and ready for the takeoff. The part brake can come off. And we'll slowly and smoothly come up on the power to around 45 inches manifold pressure for the takeoff. So power is set, T's and P's look good. Nose wanting to come down now. Aiming to lift off around 105 miles an hour. Looks like the aircraft wants to get airborne a little bit earlier than that though. Tapping the brakes. Checklist calls for the gear up at 500 feet. So we'll just climb away. We'll take off power for now. Through 500 feet we'll get the gear up and we'll start a turn back towards the airfield. Anyway, the gear's up now. So we'll come back to 35 inches on the manifold pressure. 2500 RPM. Get the canopy closed up. And one thing I did notice on the takeoff, the aircraft is incredibly nose heavy at the moment, so I think that was a typo in the checklist. I think we do need 3 units up of trim. Yeah, so as I say, Big Radials does provide us with a few little options there to tweak the realism settings, namely the gear and flap operation as well as some takeoff and landing tips. We'll cover that more in the full review video that will be coming out later on. So for the after takeoff checklist, the gear and the flaps are up. Elevator and rudder trims are set. Throttle we have 35 inches and 2500 RPM, and the electric fuel pump can come off. So we'll level off around 3,000 feet. We'll fly overhead the field and then we'll track outbound on a heading of around 017 out towards Lake Louisa. So you can see the field just down below us at our 11 o'clock there. Just getting the aircraft trimmed off currently. Quite a lot of forward elevator trim now needed to get the aircraft straight and level. And we'll turn now onto our heading of 017. A little bit tricky to navigate in the aircraft currently, as there's no level line on either of the compass or the directional gyro. So that's something that could do with a little bit of a fix. But the lake should be a nice big easy feature to spot, so shouldn't matter if we're slightly inaccurate on the heading there. Just come slightly out to the left again. Be about a 6-minute leg outbound. I think I can already see the lake off in the distance. So for the cruise checklist, the cowl flaps will move to the high speed position. Trim is adjusted. We'll check the fuel gauge every 5 minutes. We'll come on to the wing tanks shortly. We're still climbing here slightly at the moment, so we'll just keep continuing to trim forward. And for the recommended power settings, we're looking for 30 inches manifold pressure and about 2300 RPM, so we'll just come back slightly more on the RPM there. As I say, we'll just continue to track northbound towards Lake Louisa. Take a little bit more of a look at the external model of the aircraft and get a feel for the external sounds as well. I'll come back to you over the lake, we'll do a quick lap around the lake and then we'll head back towards Orlampa. So welcome back to the cockpit. As you can see, we're just approaching Lake Louisa currently. Interestingly, we have Disney World just off on our right. Can't make it out myself currently, but it is just out there, off out towards the east. Anyway, once we're over the lake, we'll put the aircraft through a few little manoeuvres just to get a tiny bit of a feel for the flight modelling. As we're tracking outbound, we'll do a quick aileron roll now. We'll just come up on the power in preparation for the manoeuvres, build up some airspeeds. So coming all the way back up on the RPM, and we'll come back up to our 45 inches of manifold pressure. So for the aileron roll, we'll just do full scale left deflection, see what sort of a roll weight we get out of the aircraft. So that's full deflection to the left on the aileron, which seems reasonable. Overall, the aircraft doesn't feel particularly sensitive on the controls, unlike a lot of aircraft that you get in the sim. I will say that the controls do feel a little bit on the heavier side. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not for the P40. Anyway, we'll come up to around 5,000 feet, we'll put the aircraft through a loop. It says 5,000 feet. So we'll just roll ourselves into a descent, build up some airspeeds. And just coming up on 400 miles an hour, so back on the stick. And again, the aircraft feeling quite heavy on the controls. That's almost full back deflection on the stick now. That's full deflection. Off the power. Through the loop. And levelling the aircraft back off. So overall, that felt pretty good. As I say, the aircraft controls are a little bit on the heavier side. I find that I need a lot more deflection to get the aircraft to function as I desire than you would on most of the other aircraft in the sim. To some degree though, I do quite like that, as a lot of the aircraft, as we know, are definitely a little bit on the overly sensitive side. Just track out again towards the south. We'll try a quick stall and then we'll head back towards Orlampa. So coming off the power. Just holding the pitch there, letting the speed bleed off. Through about 80 miles an hour now. No buffeting or sound, the nose dropping, but as is fairly typical in the sim, the nose drops in a rather sedate fashion. Certainly not as aggressive as one might expect. Anyway, back up to 30 inches on the manifold pressure. And we're looking for a heading of about 197 to get home. So overall, I have to say I'm really enjoying my flight out in the Big Radials P40 so far. The aircraft is certainly not study level. The systems are done pretty well, but overall I think you can get a sense for the fact that the behind the scenes systems modelling is not certainly to A2A standards. It's probably more to a similar level to the Flying Iron simulation Spitfire. And again, that's not a criticism. As always, I try and review the product based on what it's trying to achieve and who it's aimed at. And I think this product, particularly with the price point, is not expecting to be completely study level. In terms of the flight model, there are certainly some deficiencies there as well, but again, that seems to be the case with pretty much every aircraft in the sim currently, unfortunately. And there are certain areas that I would still like to see some work, but I'll hold off on critiquing those too much until I get my hands on the final product. As I say, the flight controls do feel a little bit heavier than most other aircraft in the sim. Overall, I do like that effect. I think it's a little bit more authentic, but I do find myself having to put in some rather large deflections at certain points, perhaps a little bit more so than I would expect. You also need to trim the aircraft out quite a lot as well. Although again, I'm not familiar with the real world P40, so that may well be accurate. Anyway, we can see the lakes just off in the distance there, so we'll track back towards them. I'll come back on the power slightly, we'll start losing some altitude. We'll probably fly overhead the field and then come back in for a left-hand circuit rather than entering straight in, which we could do off this heading. As you can see, the P40 absolutely drinks fuel as well. We've already burned through 75% of our fuel in the fuselage tank. Probably should have changed over already there, really, so we'll come on to the rear wing tank for now. So tracking inbound back towards the field. The field should be just off our nose between the two main lakes. Can't quite make it out yet though. We'll come back off the power slightly, we'll start a little bit of a descent. And what we'll do, we'll fly past the field just to make sure the runway's clear, then we'll come join the circuit overhead for a left-hand downwind. We'll make a nice wide circuit just to give us plenty of time to get the aircraft set up for the arrival. I think I can make out the hangar buildings now, just off the nose. The airfield's just passing off the left machine gun now. Just make out runway 22 as well. We're more or less aligned with that at the moment. Come back up on the power slightly, level off around 2,000 feet for now. So there's the airfield down below us. The runway looks to be clear, so we'll join overhead, as I say. And again, overall the P40 is much heavier on the controls than other aircraft that I've flown in the sim so far. I'm not sure how representative that is of the real aircraft, but overall I think it flies quite nicely. And we'll just continue tracking outbound momentarily just to give ourselves a little bit more room to manoeuvre on the approach. The gear does take quite a long time to extend in the P40, so want to give ourselves plenty of time. Come around onto a downwind now, we'll call downwind.
Foxtrot Alpha 08 traffic Gulf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is on downwind runway 22.
And for the approach checklist, mixture is in the auto-rich position, propeller control can come to fully fine. Fuel selector will go to the front tank now, so that is the fullest tank. Cowl flaps are fully open. Speed will get down below 170 miles an hour before we take the gear. Start coming around onto final now, we'll let the speed start bleeding off. And again, the aircraft does have the option to realistically extend and retract both the gear and the flaps, but today we'll just use the simplified option. Keeping a good eye on the airfield. Letting that speed bleed back. And just coming through 170 miles an hour now, so we'll take the gear down. As you can see, the gear's pretty slow to come down, one wheel at a time as well. Start a gentle turn onto final. It's all clear on approach. So we have 3 gear down indications. We'll start taking some flap. We'll get the canopy opened up as well. Looking to fly the approach around 110 miles an hour, thereabouts. We'll leave the aircraft in half flaps for now, as full flaps gives us an awful lot of drag. So brakes are off and checked, undercarriage is down, mixture is auto-rich, fuel pump is on, fuel quantities are sufficient, instruments are checked, and harness is secure. The checklist calls for you to trim slightly tail heavy, which is quite interesting. I haven't found many aircraft that you need to do that. I'm not sure if that's true to life or not, but I have found if you don't do that in the P40, then you will find yourself lacking enough elevator authority to get a nice smooth touchdown. Take some more flap. So we have ourselves nicely lined up with the runway. We're maintaining about 110 miles an hour. Having to use quite a lot of forward pressure on the stick at the moment to keep the nose down, to keep the aircraft descending, which does feel rather odd, but that is as per the checklist. So I'll take full flap now. Coming up on the power to account for the extra drag. We'll aim to touch down roughly abeam the taxiway off to the apron. The runway markings are rather unclear here at Orlampa. So pitch is full fine, undercarriage is down, flaps are set, landing clearance is not required, the runway is clear. So slowly coming back off the power, easing off on the forward pressure on the stick. Off the power, holding the aircraft off. There's touchdown. Easy on the brakes to slow the aircraft down. Slow ourselves down a little bit more. And we'll start swinging ourselves around to backtrack the runway. Get ourselves backtracked towards the apron. Flaps can come up now. Double checking the cowl flaps are fully open. Now we'll just zigzag our way back to try and give us the best possible forward visibility that we can get. So vacating off at the left here, again easy on the brakes to slow down. Looks like we have a ground attendant already waiting for us, so we'll go park up by them. And again, back off the power. Temperatures and pressures looking good at the moment. We'll get the engine shut down as quickly as we can. And again, easy on the brakes. Heart brake on. We're either around 1000 RPM. So shutdown checklist, parking brake is set. Radio can come off. Bring the mixture back to the idle cutoff position. Okay, we have a good shutdown. Ignition can come off. And we'll turn all these switches off, so the lights, fuel pump, generator and battery. And that's the shutdown checklist complete. So there you go guys, I hope you enjoyed our quick blast out in the Big Radials P40B Tomahawk. As I say, I'm not going to give you a full breakdown on the product in this video. We'll wait until we have our hands on the release candidate before we do that. But I will briefly run through my overall thoughts and feelings on the product so far. Firstly and foremostly, I think it's important to understand who the product is aimed at and what the product is looking to achieve. Big Radials themselves have stated that they want to create an aircraft that almost anybody can hop in and fly, while simultaneously producing an aircraft that has a decent amount of systems depth and flight modelling fidelity. So straight off the bat, I think it's fair to say that the aircraft is not aiming to be study level, and we'll be judging it accordingly. We'll cover what I like about the product first, and then at the end I'll give a list of areas that I would like to see improvement in. So what did I like about the Big Radials Tomahawk P40B? Well, firstly, I thought the aircraft was really good fun. I don't generally like to compare two different products, but for me the P40B really reminded me of the Flying Iron Simulation Spitfire, both of which are aircraft that, whilst not study level, are good fun to fly and do have a reasonable amount of systems depth. The same goes for the flight modelling. It's again not study level, but it overall gives a nice impression of the aircraft. And actually the P40B is one of the first aircraft within Microsoft Flight Simulator that I've come across that really feels like the flight model is significantly different from the default aircraft. I think one of the reasons I've enjoyed my flights in the P40B is that it's an aircraft that I'm not all that familiar with. So it was good fun sitting down with the manual and trying to figure the aircraft out. And as I say, there is enough systems depth there that you can sit down with the aircraft and really run through the procedures more or less as you would in the real world aircraft. Again, as with the Flying Iron Simulation Spitfire, I think that most of the systems modelling going on behind the scenes with the aircraft is kept to a fairly simple standard, but the aircraft did seem to operate very nicely within all of the real world temperature and pressure limitations, and the heating and cooling modelling of the engine all seem to be modelled to a pretty reasonable standard as well. Graphically, I think overall the developer has done a really nice job with the aircraft. Again, there are a few areas that I would like to see improved, and we'll touch more on those in just a moment. In terms of the sounds, the engine sounds internally I think are rather excellent. Unfortunately, the external engine sounds are one of the weaker parts of the product currently. Again, we'll touch more on that in just a moment. In terms of the negative points with the product to date, and again I will stress that this is a pre-release version of the aircraft. The first is the external engine sounds. As I mentioned, they sound okay when the engine's idling, but once you come up to full power they actually sound rather quiet. They're actually a little bit difficult to hear, and they really don't do justice to the aircraft. Flight model wise, as we saw at low speed, the aircraft still lacks in fidelity, and again it would be nice to see that improved. The rest of my list of improvements for the aircraft are somewhat more minor. There are a few areas on the aircraft where I feel the modelling or the texturing could be improved. As I've already mentioned, I would like to hear some improved cockpit ambience and switch sounds, and there are a few little details that are still missing, for example a lubber line on the compass and directional gyro. Ultimately though, I think Big Radials have achieved their goals in producing a nice model of the P40, which should be accessible to most and good fun to fly. Anyway guys, that just about wraps it up for now. As I say, this is a first impressions video, so we'll come back once the product is released with a full review of the aircraft. As always, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave those down in the comment section below. and I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, thanks very much, and I'll see you all again soon.